Thank you. Thanks very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Doug Wilson, thank you very, very much for your kindness, for your friendship, and for your counsel through these years. It is a great honor to be with all of you, so many people who have done so very much for the country that we love. For more than a decade, the Truman National Security Project has been at the forefront of nurturing a new generation of leaders in foreign policy and national security. From military bases in San Diego to federal agencies in Washington, you are not only advocating for a strong, smart, principled approach to international affairs, you're taking action, and you're doing it every day. Through Operation Free, you are mobilizing a coalition of veterans, activists, and experts who know our reliance on fossil fuels threatens the very security of our country. And through no exceptions, you're working to make sure that our military recruits the most talented Americans, regardless of gender. And through the Frontline Civilians Initiative, you are supporting the diplomats, the journalists, the NGO workers, the development professionals who are not in uniform, but who nonetheless put their lives on the line to alleviate human suffering around the world every day. Thanks to all of you, the Truman Project has emerged as a valuable source of ideas on some of the toughest challenges facing our nation today. And we need those bold ideas now more than ever. America's role in the world is to advance the cause of a rising global middle class, free from oppression, free from want, free from fear. But after 12 years on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, after a global financial crisis and a long recession that our people are still struggling to fully recover from, it's understandable, isn't it, that many Americans would like to disengage from the world around us. That's understandable, but it is not responsible. Because our nation's security and our children's prosperity demand that we actually be more engaged with the world around us and not less. We do this primarily by making our nation more prosperous and secure here at home. We do this by exercising our economic, diplomatic, military, and healing power around the world in ways that are consistent with our most deeply held moral principles. In essence, we must create a more far-sighted and more proactive foreign policy based on engagement and collaboration rather than going it alone. And we must construct a new framework for our national security strategy focused on the reduction of threats. Today's challenges defy easy solutions. We may have the most sophisticated military in the world, but we do not have a silver bullet. So this morning, I want to share a vision with you of a more agile, innovative, and forward-thinking approach, one that will enable us to master the challenges of our time rather than falling victim to them. And my purpose in our short time today is not to offer soundbite solutions to a laundry list of crises around the world. My purpose here today instead is to lay out a long-term framework for pursuing our national interests in a very fast-changing world. Some important history. As America and her allies brought World War II to a close, a plain-spoken man named Harry Truman became our president. Having fought in the First World War, Truman knew something about courage, he knew something about service, and he knew something about sacrifice. It was Truman who concluded World War II. It was Truman who brought forward the Marshall Plan that would turn our former enemies into longtime democratic allies. And it was Truman who led the United States to recognize Israel immediately upon her founding. And it was Truman who crafted and signed into law the National Security Act of 1947, the most long-lasting overhaul of our national security strategies and institutions. We must take the broader lessons of what worked in Truman's day and apply them to the emerging threats of our own time. Because today we face an equally daunting array of threats. These threats are much different, and in some instances far more complex than those that we saw in the 1990s. What am I talking about? Violent extremism, nuclear proliferation, pandemics, cyber attacks, rising inequality, failed nation states, the mega droughts and the floods and the famines caused by climate change. And more refugees now on our planet than at any time since World War II. It is time for a new National Security Act, one focused on the reduction of threats like these. Understanding precedes action. And to understand, we must ask the right questions. Among them, how do we balance the use of our military, diplomatic, and economic tools to advance our national interests in ways that are consistent with our most deeply held American principles? What enhanced roles might institutions like the Defense Threat Reduction Agency or the Centers for Disease Control play in looking over the horizon to alert us far earlier to threats as they are beginning to emerge? And what are the forward-looking investments and new alliances that we can make with other nations that will stem the root causes of instability? And how can we best prepare to defend ourselves from our enemies while doing all that we can to prevent conflict in the first place? The first and foremost responsibility of the President of the United States is to protect the people of the United States. Today, this means transforming our military's force structure to focus on 21st century challenges. It means protecting our privacy and our security at the same time. It means reducing security threats not only with better technology, but with better human intelligence on the ground and in the cultures that are so important for us to understand. It means transforming the way we partner with the private sector and civil society, harnessing the energy and the talents of the American people to advance our values. It means joining with allies to deploy renewable energy technologies, both at home and around the world, to confront the very real and very present danger of potentially irreversible climate change. It means understanding that comprehensive immigration reform here at home is both an economic and a national security imperative. It means protecting the United States from cyber attacks on the digital battlefields and the servers and smartphones. It means rethinking how we deal with nations like Russia and like China, which are neither trusted allies nor are they total adversaries. It means forging a new alliance for progress right here in our own hemisphere, which we have undervalued and neglected for far too long. And it means forming regional partnerships to address emerging threats in places like the South China Sea, the Arctic, and the sea lanes of the Middle East. There is urgent work to be done. And nowhere is this more collaborative approach to this work more important than in confronting the growing and immediate challenge of severe climate change. For years, the Pentagon has recognized global warming as an urgent national security threat. And your organization's leader, former Army Captain Mike Breen, put it best at a recent congressional hearing when he said, and I quote, "Over 97% of climate scientists say that man-made climate change is a reality. As a combat leader," he said, "if 97% of my intelligence indicated that I was about to face a lethal danger that would risk the lives of my paratroopers, I would be committing unconscionable malpractice if I did not listen and act." End quote. Mike is right. The energy technologies needed to combat climate change exist today. It's only the political will that is lacking. America can and must lead the way by pursuing an ambitious plan to ensure that our country is powered 100% by clean energy by 2050. Climate change is not only a very real existential threat to human life, it is also the greatest business opportunity to come to our country in over 100 years. So we must seize that opportunity by creating an American green jobs agenda that's actually a match for the climate challenge. We need to invest in resilience from the Jersey Shore to California's Central Valley. We need to spur innovation to develop cutting-edge technologies that will create jobs at home and unlock new markets abroad. We need to embrace new ideas at every level in states that have shown that they can work, like California, and as we did in Maryland, where in just 8 years we increased renewable energy capacity by 57% and made ourselves a clean tech jobs hub and cut carbon emissions by 10%. America's leadership and example are absolutely essential because climate change is a global challenge with global consequences. It is the transformation that transforms everything. And by confronting this challenge, we can realize global economic opportunities and job opportunities for the United States. We must partner with emerging markets in our own hemisphere and beyond to distribute renewable energy solutions and green design. We must aggressively push for global emissions agreements in venues like the upcoming UN Climate Summit in Paris, and we must seed and scale and deploy American-made renewable energy technologies throughout the world to reduce mankind's carbon footprint, to preserve the living systems of this earth for ourselves and our posterity. Like climate change, trade is a global challenge, and it also has global consequences. In our closely connected world, prosperity is not a zero-sum game. While the cause of a rising global middle class is vital to our long-term economic and national security, our power is grounded in the strength here at home of our own middle class. What gain is there for the United States in secret trade deals that fast-track and export American jobs and undermine wages for American workers? Trade deals that actually raise standards for workers and the environment are trade deals that are good for the United States of America. Trade deals that lower standards for workers and lower standards for the environment are trade deals that are bad for the United States of America. This is not a call for protectionism. I have led trade delegations all around the world, but it is a call for fair competition, the kind of competition that's consistent with our most deeply held American values and the cause we share. The national interest of the people of the United States is not measured by the bottom line profits of multinational corporations, however large. No nation ever offshored its way to greatness. To rebuild the American dream, we must stop making it easier to ship American jobs abroad and start making better investments to grow our economy and build up our own country here at home. One such investment is cybersecurity, a new domain that is both an emerging opportunity and an emerging challenge to every facet of our society. You know, for centuries, nation-states sought to protect themselves from attacks by land and sea, and later from attacks by air. And now in this information age, we must move to defend ourselves and our economy from attacks carried out over the internet. Last year, global cyber attacks jumped by nearly 50%. Stolen intellectual property and other opportunities lost to cybercrime could cost us as many as 200,000 American jobs annually. And our critical infrastructure remains extremely vulnerable to hackers. Nuclear power plants, public transportation, air traffic control, water systems, and even the electric grid itself, all in danger of being shut down with a few lines of malicious code. And the harm would extend far beyond just the loss of personal data. It could grind our national and our metro economies to a halt. So we must develop and follow through on a comprehensive new agenda for cybersecurity that protects every level of our society. To accomplish this goal, we must harness the skills of American engineers, designers, and scholars from Silicon Valley to Fort Meade in order to secure our networks. And we must empower our National Guard with a new mission. The mission of protecting our cyber networks here in the homeland on a state-by-state level. Now, I have seen this firsthand. As Doug mentioned, as the President's appointed co-chair of the Council of Governors, a group charged by act of Congress to work with the Secretaries of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security, I advocated for a new national initiative to recruit and to equip and to train up cyber units in every state's National Guard. These are highly paid skills, highly sought after in the private sector, and therefore very difficult to compete with in the public sector. And the quickest and most cost-effective way, I believe, to stand up this needed capacity is in the citizen soldier context of every state's National Guard. Furthermore, National Guard cyber units, I believe, are best suited under our Constitution for the homeland mission of collaborating with public and private sector partners to protect vital networks. Like cybersecurity, sustainable development is a national security imperative, and it requires a long-term commitment to advance the cause of a rising global middle class. And this is not a fanciful dream. Hard-won progress is already being made, and all of us should take some pride in that. Inspired by the Millennium Development Goals, the United States, in partnership with the global community, has cut extreme poverty and child deaths in half over the last 25 years. And that is one of the greatest measurable leaps ever achieved in human prosperity and health. And yet still, more than 1 billion people in Asia and Africa, and here in our own hemisphere in Latin America, live on less than $1.25 a day, all of them vulnerable to the scourge of extreme poverty and violent extremism. Is it any surprise that in Liberia, a country with just one medical school and meager hospital supplies, that more than 10,000 people were infected with Ebola? Is it any surprise that in Honduras, a country with the world's highest murder rate and the most brutal drug trafficking, that thousands of people have fled for their lives here in our own hemisphere? Our leadership in collaboration with other nations is essential. To be successful, we must involve more Americans from all walks of life in the cause of development. Scientists and students, and entrepreneurs and security experts, business executives and urban planners. We must better integrate our development and our military teams as well in troubled hotspots, ensuring that we are tailoring our assistance to get things done within the local culture and the local place. We must support American businesses that actually project our values in emerging markets, and we must adequately fund our diplomatic and our development agencies, particularly USAID and the State Department. We must achieve the goal of ending extreme poverty, hunger, and preventable child and maternal death all within the next 15 years. By promoting open societies, by protecting the dignity of human lives in fragile states, we are not only building the next generation of political and economic leaders, but we are also reducing the threat of our being drawn into more costly conflicts in the decades to come. As James Mattis, the former commander of the U.S. Central Command, put it bluntly, quote, "If you don't fund the State Department fully, then I need to buy more ammunition," end quote. Development, defense, diplomacy, they all stand together as equal and essential parts of our national security, or at least they should. They are also critical to reducing threats in what might be the most volatile and dangerous area of the world today, the Middle East. Over the last several years, I have had the opportunity to talk with scores of patriotic Americans who have given their energies and talents in this troubled region of our world in service of our country. And I agree with the noted national security expert Phil Gordon's conclusions on our core national interests in the Middle East: to protect our allies and prevent regional war, to keep sea lanes open and provide humanitarian assistance, to prevent terrorist safe havens, and to prevent nuclear proliferation. Indeed, a nuclear-armed Iran is one of the most immediate threats that we face. I believe that negotiations are the best way to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, the best way to avoid even greater conflict in the region, and the best way to stop widespread nuclear proliferation across the Middle East. And it was for this purpose that the United States forged an unprecedented international partnership, including Russia and China, to apply the strongest set of sanctions Iran has ever faced. Those sanctions brought Iran to the negotiating table. If we reach a verifiable and forcible agreement that cuts off Iran's multiple pathways to a weapon and its ability to sprint to a bomb, Congress would be wise to support it. If, on the other hand, Iran is found to be cheating, its leaders must know that we stand ready to institute the full array of sanctions that decimated their economy. But no threat probably better illustrates the unintended consequences of a mindless rush to war and a lack of understanding than the emergence of ISIS. Containing, degrading, and defeating ISIS will require an integrated approach, an approach focused not only on military power, but on political solutions. The invasion of Iraq, along with the subsequent disbanding of the Iraqi army and military, will be remembered as one of the most tragic, deceitful, and costly blunders in U.S. history. And we are still paying the price of a war pursued under false pretenses and acquiesced to, in the words of Dr. King, by the appalling silence of the good. In confronting ISIS, we must avoid mission creep, that is true. And we must be mindful that American boots on the ground can be counterproductive to our desired outcome. We will not be successful in degrading ISIS if the number of militants taken off the battlefield is exceeded by the number of new recruits replacing them. But we must also ensure that our partners have what they need to contain, degrade, and ultimately wear down and defeat ISIS. In partnership with other nations in the region and across the world, we must counter ISIS propaganda and use our own communication tools more effectively. We must do more to amplify credible local voices in the region to reveal ISIS for what it is: a gang of murderous thugs who have perverted the name of one of the world's great religions. And we must make every effort to encourage the Iraqi government to govern far more inclusively as they train up a new army with committed leadership and a will to defend their own country. Addressing threats like ISIS will require new relationships and will require better intelligence. And this is true in every other theater of engagement as well. There is no substitute for human relationships and the work of patriotic Americans in our foreign service and our national security agencies. To succeed in a world of rapid change, we must adapt our national security institutions to better anticipate these fast emerging threats. And we must recognize that there are real lessons to be learned from the tragedy in Benghazi. Namely, we need to know in advance who is likely to take power or vie for it once a dictator is toppled, not after. Twitter and Facebook are no substitute for personal relationships and human intelligence, We must recruit and we must retain a new generation of talented American diplomats and foreign service officers, and we must give them the tools they need to identify and to engage with a new generation of leaders and from different walks of life in often very hostile environments where we lack historic ties, where we lack relationships. And that was the work, wasn't it, that Ambassador Chris Stevens was all about. He gave his life reaching out to those emerging from the rubble of Gaddafi's leadership. In remembering him, his grieving father said, and I quote, "He died doing what he loved most, working to build bridges of understanding and mutual respect between the people of the United States and the people of the Middle East. Chris was successful because he embodied the traits that have always endeared America to the world: a commitment to democratic principles and respect for others, regardless of race, religion, or culture," end quote. The greatest power we possess as Americans is just that. It is the power of our principles. We project that power around the world, primarily through our own example of the inclusive society and the inclusive economy that we build here at home. The challenges we face today to rebuild the American dream, to craft a new foreign policy of engagement and collaboration, to refocus our national security strategies on 21st century threats, these challenges are all connected, and their pursuits are all mutually reinforcing of one another. But ultimately, the source of America's global strength is our own prosperity here at home. Our economy isn't money. Our economy is people, all of our people. And only with a stronger and more inclusive economy can we maintain our security. Only with a stronger and more inclusive American economy will we succeed in pursuing a more effective foreign policy for the cause that we share and the cause that we lead of a rising global middle class free from oppression, want, and fear. In thinking deeply about America's role in the world, I find myself drawing inspiration from the very troubled world that my parents and their generation tamed, and the planet that they saved from the brink of nuclear annihilation. See, my parents were born during the Great Depression, and they were part of that great generation of Americans that went on to win the Second World War. My dad flew 33 missions over Japan in a B-24 Liberator, and he went to college only because of the GI Bill. And my mom flew in the Civil Air Patrol at the age of 17. They raised their children, the 6 of us, in a world secured by the sacrifices and the better choices and the service of their generation. We must remember the abiding truth of their success, that our strength abroad depends upon our strength at home. No fighter jet or troop battalion will keep us as safe as a vibrant economy, a strong democracy, and a growing and rising middle class. By restoring an American economy that works for all of us again, we will make ourselves a more prosperous and a more secure nation. We will give our children a future with more opportunity rather than less, and we will make our planet a healthier, more peaceful, and more just place for all of humanity. And these are the ambitions worthy of a truly great people. And this is why I am running for President of the United States. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
The governor will take a few questions. Thank you, sir. The governor will take a few questions from Truman members only. We do have microphones in the audience. They will come to you, so raise your hand if you have a question.
And this time is not exclusively for questions if you should have answers. We would really like to hear your answers. Yes, sir.
Governor, in a few years back, I was a Baltimore resident, and you served as my governor. So,
Oh, very cool. What's your name?
John Scanlon. So thank you for your service in Maryland. You talked earlier about having defense development diplomacy on equal levels. And one thing right now that's unequal is that development lacks a cabinet-level agency. Is that something that you would consider if you were to be president?
Yes. That might qualify as an answer. Yeah. I think that's. I think that could well be a way to elevate sustainable development to the level that it should receive. So thank you for that. Good one. That's why we come to the Truman Project. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions? Got a gentleman over there.
You can hold it. Oh. Okay, good. That's fine. I'm also a former member or resident of Maryland. I actually saw you play in Silver Spring 4 years ago.
Cool.
At
And
that bar in
he came
downtown
here
Silver
anyway.
It was great. What I was going to ask is, you brought up a new and reformed National Security Act to replace the one of 1947. What would be the major tenets of that? What would you change?
Yeah. Well, I think that we have not called the great minds of our country together to this task since 1947, really in a holistic way. And the threats that we face are different threats. And I think it's time. And I think we should not presuppose the outcome of that understanding and that search for a better way to anticipate threats, a better way to maybe take agencies like the Defense Threat Reduction Agencies or the Centers for Disease Control and try to reimagine how we might create a more robust function when it comes to looking over the horizon so that we don't find ourselves outside the turning radius of these events. I'm thinking of the pandemic and the outbreak of Ebola in Africa. There should, and from the lessons that I've learned as an executive, 15 years of executive service as the mayor of a very great but very challenged city, and then as a governor, it's critically important that you be able to develop the capacity to anticipate threats before they rise to the level of crises. And frankly, I'm not sure that we're doing such a good job of that. We tend to wait until it seems the only options left to us are military options before we focus on the things that need to be done. I also see the need for new alliances in places around the world. I mentioned some of them, I think, the Arctic, South China Sea, and other areas of pandemic. So I believe that the National Security Act of 1947 lasted a good long time, but the threats are different today. And we should also, as a nation, get our heads around this new domain that we have to protect of cyber. We're sometimes struggling to catch up with events that are happening a lot faster than our intention is putting in place proactive measures to meet it. Go over here. We'll do right, left.
Perfect. Thanks for being here, Governor.
Thanks. What's your name?
Just heard questions about sustainable development and looking out at the future. One of the things that you did as governor that's been really intriguing and inspiring to me was creating this genuine progress indicator in Maryland. Thinking about ways that we could be thinking about externalities and our core indicators that we use to judge progress. Because GDP and the other headline indicators are incredibly short-term and don't take into account environmental and social factors that really matter for people's lives. So I was wondering if you think that this is something that's worth scaling up at a federal level, or at least starting a conversation about that.
Yeah, I absolutely do, and thank you for noticing. Honestly, sometimes you do these things, you think they're really cutting edge, your whole cabinet gets into it, you spend a lot of time, and then, you know, in terms of public attention, it sometimes seems like nobody saw. But we were the first state to adopt a genuine progress index, where instead of looking merely at state gross domestic product, or that we looked at our quality of life, the health of the air that we breathe, the health of the rivers and the streams, the time that we spend and waste in traffic when we could be either with our families or doing productive things at work. So we put all of these together into a genuine progress index, and it's our hope that over time that genuine progress index will guide the decisions we make in our budget and the capital investments we make on something. I see John Picari, our former Secretary of Transportation in Maryland, on very important causes like a different type of sustainable development, namely smart growth, not paving over the lands of the Chesapeake Bay, developing workforce housing near transit centers so that you're able to improve the quality of life and reduce traffic congestion and the like. And I think that a genuine progress index on the national scale would also be important, as well as a development tool around the world. I mean, as I have talked to people who do a lot of this work, I mean, it seems to me that human nature is the same the world over. I mean, people want to be able to raise their kids and have them actually live to adulthood. They want to be able to feed their kids. They need clean water. There's certain building blocks to that quality of life. And if people see, even in conflict-prone parts of the world, that they're able to give their kids a better way forward, they will work hard, run through walls, sacrifice in order to make that progress possible. And I think a genuine progress indicator could well be a tool at the national and international level. Thanks for asking that. Over here, it looks like a whole row.
Anya Grigas, you mentioned that Russia today is neither an ally nor a true adversary, and you've also focused quite a bit on cybersecurity, and Russia remains, well, or has emerged as one of the greatest threats in the cyber arena. Could you comment a little bit more about your views on Russia and its current resurgent foreign policy?
Sure. We've all been reading in the newspaper and watching events of Russian expansion and the events in Ukraine, and at the same time, in the Iran nuclear negotiations, Russia was one of those states that was part of that effort. They were involved, pretty deeply involved over a year ago in events in Syria, no doubt remain so. And what I was underscoring is that in some of these things, and China as well, in some places we confront China, other places, as in partnering to scale up renewable energy solutions in this world. A collaboration with China could well be the salvation of the planet. So where Russia's concerned, I'm also very keenly aware of their capacities where cyber is concerned. Little known fact, Maryland actually has had a National Guard mission to Estonia for some 20 years or more, and was involved in training up Estonia for NATO membership. I visited Estonia, met with their head of state, and also toured the NATO Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity there. Estonia is one of the few countries that's actually suffered a full-scale cyber attack and a shutdown that didn't stop the Estonians from using technology. Instead, they upped their defenses and became actually more proficient and better equipped. Get this, they actually vote online. That's how secure they've been able to make their country. So it is not as, this is not the Cold War anymore, where we have we are facing opponents that are totally adversarial in every realm. There are shifting issues, different interests in different regions and different alliances, and we have to be adaptable and we have to be flexible, even as we are firm and understand our commitments to allies and put in place, as we have now with allies, the sanctions that show Russia that they have a choice to make. They can either harm their economy by harming nations around them, or they can respect international norms and have a better quality of life and a better economic life for their people.
Sir?
Here? I'm sorry.
Right over to your far right.
Yes, sir.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Thank you.
So, Governor, I had a question, and in my mind I'm thinking of the quote that says, a country that separates its warriors from its scholars will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. And
Who said that?
I don't know, but I think it's a pretty good one, right? I'll take credit if nobody else knows who it came from.
But you should have just said Cicero.
Yeah.
Now, we are,
Cicero, Plato,
we all would
Aristotle,
have
there's some go-tos there.
Cicero.
And it reminded me of an experience in my second tour to Iraq. I was reclassified from an armor officer to a civil affairs officer, and as the Army often does, without training, just kind of throw in little OTJ as you get in there and figure it out on the ground in Iraq. And what I saw, what was frustrating about it was it's putting the military in a role of nation building without the integration of effort for the 3 Ds that you identified so clearly and I think so accurately. How do you anticipate being able to tie together the efforts of developmental organizations, diplomatic organizations, and defense organizations in a very functional way to make sure that you do have a circumstance where you have military members that are wise in the ways of diplomacy and development, you have people within development that understand defense and diplomacy, and seeing that really functional integration, I think too often you see those cylinders of excellence, right? Those silos that exist with each one of those entities. How do you envision the ability to kind of break down some of those silos and see more cross-training and cross-work within those agencies of the federal government to make sure that when we go in holistically and not as a coalition of these cylinders of excellence, but actually as an interoperating group of the same mission from the United States?
Terrific question. And tell me your name.
Jonathan Munkin, sir.
Jonathan, thank you. And thanks for what you've done for all of us. The problem you describe is not limited to the military or sustainable development or diplomacy. It's part of human nature. Let me try this one on you. Everybody likes a common platform as long as they can maintain their own, right? That's the way that human nature is. It seems that since the days of Descartes, the pendulum has been swinging to specialization and ever more, as your terms, cylinders of excellence, silos of excellence. In the old days, governors used to be considered great governors based on how many different departments they could break down the big departments into, specialization, separation. But now you see this not only in today's topic, but you see this in health, right? As we look to raise up wellness rather than disease as the focus. You see this also in education. You see this if you go on college campuses and ask kids what their majors are. Half of them have 2 majors. So more and more we're realizing it's not the separation or the specialization, but the integration that allows us to be effective on a team. Same way as on a football team, right? There's only so many things any individual can do, run, pass, catch, but when you start running plays, then you actually move the ball down the field. I believe that the way to do this is to, first and foremost, recognize that problem. And then I think we have to start in an intentional way, training, drilling, studying, and working with each other long before we're deployed to a battlefield. And I think we have the ability as a nation to do that probably better than any other. But I think it will take some intention and some conscious effort to say that this is the problem. And we can solve it by creating collaborative teams, teams that train together, deploy together, think together, and work together. So that's what I would envision. We see somebody over here. There's still people in the middle here.
Hello, Christine Vargas. Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
You
Christine.
touched on better humans, which I found very interesting. That's not something we hear a lot.
Better human intelligence. I hope I
Yes.
didn't swallow the second word.
No,
Better-
I'm using the acronym for
I mean, we all
you.
hope to be better humans one day, but
Yeah. That said, we've just had a horrific hack at OPM that, well, it happened a while ago, and they've just started telling us about it, and that's compromised a lot of SF-86s for people who want to join the effort you want. What would you do about that? How would you make that particular effort to hire good human safer, more practical, and more pragmatic? Because OPM couldn't do it before you took away their ability to have any sort of credible cybersecurity.
Before who took away their ability? What's that? Oh, in general. Look, we are rushing to catch up to this era of cyber threats and hacks and the theft of personal information. I can tell you in our state we found, we were fortunate in that because of the location of NSA within Maryland, we actually had a pretty well-trained Air Guard unit that understood cybersecurity, and we brought them in to do kind of red team, blue team, and start working methodically through our larger departments, those that had personnel records and personal information. And I can see every state doing that, but I think the United States needs to do that as well. There are some collaborative efforts underway on cybersecurity, but there doesn't seem to be the urgency of command and control, especially in the civilian realm, for putting up the robust defenses. And it seems that we need to do a much better job of bringing in the experts in IT, in private sector and private contractor world, from Silicon Valley to Fort Meade, in order to do a better job of this. One of the big challenges we face throughout government, I have found, is in our procurement of IT services. Boy, are we awful at procuring IT services. No offense to those of you that got a gig or have a, no offense. If you got a gig, great, but we're not terribly good at it, and it's a capacity that we probably need a task force to rapidly staff up. This sort of low bid thing doesn't serve us very well when it comes to IT. I think we need to look at cybersecurity much more as a service than a procurement, and I think that we should allow for more leeway in terms of exacting standards and responsiveness and things of that nature, rather than falling victim to the oppression of low bid or let's cross our fingers and hope it doesn't happen while we're here. Got some people in the center.
Question?
Pardon?
One more question.
One more question. Let's hope it's a good one. Who has the best question? There's a woman right here in the center who who looks like she, her eyes tell me she has a good question. Hey, Deborah.
Angelique Young, Maryland resident and frontline civilian. So first of all, thank you for your support for frontline civilians. We very much appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, many of the challenges that you mentioned, whether it's the Ebola crisis, the economy, preventing and countering violent extremism, all these are challenges where globally women can play a vital role in addressing them. And I'm wondering if in your vision of national security, there's a way we can elevate women's role in countering those challenges and how you might do that.
Yeah, I have, again to the thrust of, I think it was Jonathan's question about integration. One of the reasons why we're such an innovative economy, and is because of this notion we sometimes take for granted as Americans, that full inclusion and full participation makes us better as a nation. It also allows us to develop human solutions to human problems because of the perspectives that are welcomed around that table. my father was a trial lawyer, and he used to tell us at the dinner table, you know, I never once lost a case because an empaneled jury of women and men made a decision contrary to what the evidence and the facts were. Now, he would say he lost them for other reasons, usually poorly appointed judges, but I do believe that, especially in military, foreign service, sustainable development, that the perspectives offered by teams of men and women are critically important. And I certainly found that in my service in city government and state government, particularly when it came to public safety, which, I don't know, perhaps might seem counterintuitive to some, but not to all of you. So how do we do that? How do we lift up the role of women? I think you lift up the leaders. There's oftentimes much is made of firing underperformers. I've found that you get organizations to change and transform their culture best when you lift up the leaders and celebrate the success of women and men who are doing incredibly difficult things and doing them with a tremendous amount of innovation, creativity, and excellence. So I think that that's how we do it, and we do it by lifting up the examples of the many, many, many strong and effective and creative women throughout our defenses and our foreign service and sustainable development. Look, let me say in closing that I really appreciate what so many of you have done for our country, and you give me a tremendous amount of hope for where our country's headed. As I travel around the nation talking to people under 40, I rarely ever meet people that want to bash immigrants, that deny that climate change is real, or want to discriminate against gay couples. And that tells me that our country is moving to a much more compassionate, a much more generous, and a much more connected place. And the other thing that I take a tremendous amount of hope and draw a lot of optimism from is that for the next generation of Americans, I mean, that word foreign almost becomes antique. You know, there's nothing foreign in our world. There's just one human yearning the world over. And we have, as a nation and as Americans, a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous amount of power to play in this direction of growth and life on this planet. And I thank you guys for leading the way. Thanks a lot.
Wow, that was really a wonderful discussion of so many of the problems and issues that the world and the country are facing, and that this group is going to be wrestling with and talking about for the next 2 days at this conference. So thank you so much, Governor O'Malley, for sharing your thoughts with us. You have, I believe, really set the table for a very positive tone, with a positive tone for this conference, and I know some very good things are going to come out of it, and I think a lot of the issues that you have raised and told us we should be thinking about, we will be thinking and talking about for both of the 2 days that come. As a token of our appreciation, we'd like to present you with this Harry Truman Inaugural Medal. I think I speak for many of us in the room when I say that I look forward to following your presidential campaign with interest, and I hope you will continue to be a champion for the liberal internationalism that unites this community in work and spirit. And I hope you'll get to California and not to San Diego and the military bases, but maybe to come see two great universities, Stanford and University of California, and share your views with them, and I think you will be warmly received. So thank you so much for being with us today.
John, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, my friend. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Very good? Thank you.